The transmission cut through every screen in human space simultaneously. Commander Vek'thor's crimson face filled billions of displays, his 4 eyes gleaming with cruel satisfaction. Behind him, 3 human diplomats knelt in chains, their faces bruised and broken. "People of Earth," Vek'thor's voice rasped through translators, "you have 48 hours to evacuate New Haven Colony and surrender the system. Refuse, and we will demonstrate why the Krythian Empire has never lost a war." He didn't wait for a response. His clawed hand moved in a blur. The diplomats fell. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the transmission ended. On Earth, in the crystalline towers of Unity Command, Queen Isabella Monroe stood motionless before the darkened screen. Her advisors erupted into chaos around her. "We need to mobilize the fleet immediately. New Haven has 2 million civilians. We'll never evacuate in time. The Krythian warfleet has 600 ships. We can't win a direct engagement." Isabella said nothing. Her dark eyes reflected the empty screen, her expression carved from ice. Fleet Admiral Torres leaned closer, his weathered face tight with concern. "Your Majesty, we need orders." Isabella turned away from the window overlooking Earth's glittering cities. "Clear the room, everyone except Torres." The advisors exchanged worried glances but obeyed. When the door sealed, Isabella walked to her private terminal and entered a code that Torres had never seen before. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a vault he didn't know existed. "Isabella, what are you doing?" She didn't answer. Her fingers moved across biometric scanners, retinal verifiers, genetic samplers. Each layer of security made Torres' stomach tighten. Finally, a single file emerged from the vault's depths. The cover was marked with a red handprint and words that made Torres go pale. "Project Reaper, classified level Omega, prohibited by unanimous council vote 2247. "No," Torres breathed. "You can't. We sealed him away for a reason." Isabella opened the file. Inside was a single photograph of a man with cold gray eyes and scars that told stories of 1,000 battles. Ethan Cross. The name alone made veteran soldiers wake screaming. "He saved us during the siege of Arcturus," Torres said, his voice shaking. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. "We lost more ships trying to contain him than we did fighting the enemy. He's not a soldier anymore, Isabella. He's something else." "I know what he is." Isabella's voice was quiet. "That's why I'm waking him up. If you do this, you might save New Haven. But you'll unleash something we can't control. Something that might not stop until every Krythian in the galaxy is dead." Isabella met his eyes. "Good." Torres saw something in her expression that terrified him more than any alien threat. This wasn't the diplomatic queen who'd negotiated peace treaties and built alliances. This was someone who'd watched her people executed on live broadcast and decided that mercy was a luxury Earth could no longer afford. "Get me a secure channel to Europa Station," Isabella said. "And Admiral, prepare a message for Commander Vek'thor. Tell him we accept his terms." "We're surrendering?" "No, we're making him think we are. It'll buy us time." Torres wanted to argue, to find another way to convince her that there were always alternatives to unleashing monsters, but he'd served long enough to recognize when a decision was final. He saluted and left to carry out her orders. Isabella stood alone in her office, holding the file that represented humanity's greatest shame and greatest weapon. She opened a secure terminal and entered the activation code she'd hoped never to use. Across the solar system on Europa's frozen surface, ancient systems began to hum with power, deep beneath the ice. In a facility that officially didn't exist, warning lights flickered to life. Automated systems that hadn't activated in 20 years ran diagnostics and initiated revival protocols. In the center of the chamber, surrounded by enough weapons to start a war, a cryogenic pod began its thaw sequence. The man inside had been sleeping since the day he'd saved humanity and proved he was too dangerous to remain awake. His service record was classified at levels that even most generals couldn't access. His kill count was a number that military psychologists said was impossible for one person to achieve. His methods had been so brutal that the council had voted unanimously to ensure he could never fight again, but the council hadn't faced Commander Vek'thor. They hadn't watched diplomats executed on live broadcast. They hadn't seen the Krythian warfleet gathering at New Haven's doorstep with enough firepower to glass the entire planet. Isabella closed her eyes and thought of the 2 million civilians who were about to die unless she made an impossible choice. She thought of the thousands more who would follow if the Krythians weren't stopped. And she thought of the man in the ice who'd once told her that mercy was a weapon you could only use once. The cryogenic pod opened with a hiss of escaping vapor. Ethan Cross's eyes opened for the first time in 2 decades. His augmented body adapted to consciousness instantly, systems that had been declared illegal after the war coming online with terrible efficiency. He sat up slowly, his scarred hands flexing as enhanced muscles remembered their purpose. A hologram flickered to life before him. Isabella's face appeared, older than he remembered, but with the same determination he'd seen in the war. "Hello, Ethan." His voice was rough from disuse, but steady. "Isabella, I assume the galaxy's ending if you're waking me up. The Krythian Empire has threatened to destroy New Haven. They executed our diplomats. They've given us 48 hours. Where's the fleet? 600 Krythian warships. We'd lose a direct engagement." Ethan stood, and even through the hologram Isabella felt the change in pressure. This wasn't a man preparing for battle. This was a predator waking from hibernation. "What are my orders?" Isabella had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her mind. She'd prepared speeches about proportional response and rules of engagement, but when she looked into those gray eyes, she remembered why they'd locked him away, and she knew that half measures would only get her people killed. No mercy. Ethan smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Isabella had ever seen. Finally, an order I can follow. The hologram disappeared. Ethan moved through the facility with practiced efficiency, gathering weapons and equipment that had been stored for his eventual reactivation. The armory held experimental technology that had been banned after the war. Weapons designed for a soldier who could survive anything and kill everyone. He suited up in stealth armor that bent light and masked heat signatures. He selected weapons that fired rounds capable of piercing capital ship hulls. He loaded systems designed to hack enemy networks and turn their own ships against them. And he activated the implants that had made him humanity's greatest monster. Neural accelerators that let him process information faster than any computer. Bone lacing that made him nearly indestructible. Muscle augmentation that gave him strength beyond human limits. Sensory enhancements that let him see in any spectrum and hear a heartbeat from 100 meters away. The scientists who'd created these augmentations had been executed after the war. Their research had been classified and locked away, but the technology remained in Ethan's body, waiting for the day someone would be desperate enough to use it again. That day had come. A stealth ship waited in the facility's hidden hangar. Ethan climbed aboard and set course for New Haven. The ship's AI greeted him with familiar efficiency. "Welcome back, Reaper. Tactical analysis shows the Krythian fleet in standard siege formation. Probability of conventional victory is 0.03%. Good thing I'm not conventional." The ship launched into the black, invisible to every scanner in human space. Ethan sat in the pilot's chair and studied the enemy fleet's composition. 600 warships, each carrying enough firepower to level a city. They orbited New Haven in overlapping defensive patterns, their commanders confident that no human force could break through. They were right. No human force could. But Ethan wasn't a force. He was a scalpel designed to cut out cancer, and the Krythian Empire had just become terminal. He approached the fleet's outer perimeter, his ship's stealth systems rendering him invisible. The Krythians had scanners that could detect a missile from 1,000,000 kilometers away, but they were looking for ships and weapons, not a single man who decided their empire's time was over. Ethan docked his ship to a supply freighter that was ferrying ammunition to the larger warships. He slipped aboard during a cargo transfer, his armor adapting to match the freighter's interior. Krythian guards walked past him without seeing, their 4 eyes scanning for threats that fit their tactical expectations. He made his way to the freighter's communication array and uploaded a virus he'd written during the flight. The virus spread through the Krythian network like a ghost, mapping their command structure and identifying key targets. Within minutes, Ethan had a complete picture of their fleet's organization. Commander Vek'thor commanded from the flagship Dominion, a massive dreadnought at the fleet's center. Surrounding him were his 5 high commanders, each controlling a battle group of over 100 ships. Below them were dozens of captains and thousands of officers, all linked through a centralized command network. The Krythians believed their strength lay in unity and coordination. They'd built an empire on the principle that overwhelming force and perfect communication could crush any opposition. Ethan was about to teach them that centralized command had a fatal weakness. He moved through the freighter like a shadow, reaching the docking bay where shuttles ferried officers between ships. He waited until a shuttle departed for the nearest battleship, then magnetically attached himself to its hull. The shuttle's pilot never knew he had a passenger. When the shuttle docked, Ethan slipped inside the battleship and found an access panel to the ship's primary systems. His implants interfaced directly with the Krythian computer, bypassing security that had taken their best programmers years to develop. He planted a second virus, this one designed to spread to every ship this battleship communicated with. Then he left his signature, a red handprint on the wall beside the access panel. He was gone before anyone noticed. Over the next 6 hours, Ethan moved through the fleet like death itself. He boarded ship after ship, planting viruses and leaving his mark. The Krythians began finding the red handprints and raised their alert status, but they were hunting for a boarding party or sabotage team. They couldn't conceive that one man could infiltrate their entire fleet. Their failure of imagination would cost them everything. Ethan reached the command battleship of High Commander Zekral, second only to Vek'thor in the fleet hierarchy. He bypassed every security measure and made his way to the commander's private quarters. Zekral was reviewing tactical displays when his door opened. He looked up in surprise. "Who are you? How did you get past my guards?" Ethan shot him once. The weapon's report was barely a whisper. Zekral fell, his 4 eyes wide with shock. Ethan accessed the commander's personal terminal and uploaded the final piece of his virus. Then he pressed his hand against the wall, leaving another red print. This time, he waited. Security found Zekral's body within minutes. The alarm spread through the fleet like wildfire. Commander Vek'thor received the report aboard the Dominion and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Fear. "One of our high commanders is dead," his tactical officer reported. "We're finding evidence of infiltration across 40 ships, all of them marked with the same symbol." Vek'thor stared at the image of the red handprint. "Show me our network integrity." The displays lit up with warning indicators. The virus had spread through 80% of their fleet, dormant but ready. Vek'thor's 4 eyes narrowed as he realized the trap. This wasn't random sabotage. Someone mapped our entire command structure. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission. Source unknown. Put it through." Ethan's face appeared on every screen in the Krythian fleet. His gray eyes were cold as deep space. "Commander Vek'thor, you wanted to demonstrate why the Krythian Empire never loses a war. Let me show you why humanity doesn't fight wars. We end them." Ethan activated the virus. Across the fleet, Krythian ships turned on each other. The virus had rewritten their targeting systems, convincing each battle group that the others were enemy vessels. Weapon systems came online. Missiles launched. Energy weapons discharged. The perfectly coordinated fleet became a chaotic massacre. Vek'thor watched in horror as his ships destroyed each other. He tried to override the virus, but Ethan had written it using quantum encryption that would take years to crack. The battle groups tore themselves apart while their crews frantically tried to regain control. "Shut down all weapon systems!" Vek'thor screamed. "Manual override on every ship." But Ethan had planned for that too. The virus had locked them out of manual controls. The only way to stop the weapons was to shut down the ships entirely, leaving them defenseless in the middle of a battle they were fighting against themselves. In 20 minutes, the Krythian fleet lost 200 ships. Vek'thor finally managed to broadcast an emergency shutdown order. The remaining 400 ships went dark, their reactors cooling, their weapons offline. The fleet that had threatened to destroy New Haven now floated helpless in space. Ethan's transmission came through again. "You have a choice, Vek'thor. Leave this system now, or I'll finish what I started." Vek'thor's pride warred with his survival instinct. He'd never retreated from battle. The Krythian Empire didn't surrender, but he'd also never faced an enemy like this. One man had infiltrated his fleet, killed a high commander, and turned their own ships against them. "Who are you?" Vek'thor demanded. "I'm what happens when you make humanity choose between mercy and survival." Vek'thor's tactical officer leaned close. "Sir, our intelligence reports are coming through. They're calling him Reaper. He fought in the human civil war 20 years ago. His kill count is classified, but rumors say he destroyed an entire rebel fleet single-handedly. One man couldn't destroy a fleet. The reports say he did it from the inside, just like now." Vek'thor stared at the red handprint on his display. He thought of his remaining ships, powered down and vulnerable. He thought of his dead commander and the 200 vessels that had been destroyed by his own fleet, and he made a choice that would haunt him forever. "All ships, prepare for emergency jump. We're leaving this system." "Sir, that's a retreat." "The Empire doesn't retreat. The Empire also doesn't send ships to be slaughtered by ghosts." Vek'thor's voice was bitter. "Activate jump drives. We'll regroup and return with proper countermeasures." The remaining Krythian ships powered up their jump drives and vanished into hyperspace, leaving New Haven saved but the war far from over. On Earth, Isabella watched the tactical display as the Krythian fleet scattered. Relief washed over her, followed immediately by a cold dread. She opened a channel to Ethan's ship. "Ethan, stand down. The threat is eliminated. Return to Europa for debrief." There was a long silence when Ethan's voice came through. It carried an edge that made Isabella's blood freeze. "They killed our diplomats on live broadcast. They threatened to glass New Haven, and you want me to let them go? They're retreating. The colony is safe. For how long? Until they come back with countermeasures? Until they hit another human world?" Ethan's voice hardened. "You gave me an order, Isabella. No mercy. I intend to follow it." "Ethan, that's not what I meant." "Yes, it is. You knew exactly what you were unleashing when you woke me up. You wanted someone who wouldn't stop until the threat was eliminated. Well, the threat is the Krythian Empire, and I'm gonna eliminate it." The transmission cut off. Isabella's hand shook as she tried to re-establish contact. Nothing. Ethan had gone dark. Admiral Torres entered the command center, his face grim. "Our deep space sensors just detected a single stealth ship entering hyperspace. Same trajectory as the Krythian fleet. He's hunting them." Isabella's voice was hollow. "He's going to follow them home. Can we stop him?" Isabella thought of the man who'd infiltrated 600 ships, killed a high commander, and turned an entire fleet against itself. The man whose augmentations made him nearly indestructible and whose tactical genius was beyond anything the galaxy had seen. "No, I don't think we can." Ethan's ship emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Krythian territory. His sensors tracked the retreating fleet to their homeworld of Krythis Prime, a planet of 12 billion souls, the Krythian Empire's heart, their capital, their center of power, their grave if Ethan had his way. He studied the planet's defenses, orbital platforms, shield generators, defense fleets, all the protections of a civilization that had conquered half the galaxy. Normally, attacking such a target would require an armada. Ethan started calculating how to do it alone. His tactical AI provided probabilities and scenarios. All of them ended in failure for a conventional approach. But Ethan had stopped being conventional the day they'd augmented him beyond human limits. He began with reconnaissance. His stealth systems let him slip past the outer defenses and scan the planet's infrastructure. He identified power grids, communication hubs, government centers. He mapped supply lines and military installations. And he found the one thing that would let him bring an empire to its knees. The Krythian homeworld's orbital defense network ran on a centralized control station. One facility that coordinated all their shields, weapons platforms, and defense fleets. The Krythians had built it that way for efficiency and rapid response. Ethan smiled. They never learned. He approached the control station using a captured Krythian shuttle he'd taken during his infiltration of their fleet. The station's security challenged him, and he provided the stolen access codes. They let him dock. 30 seconds later, every guard in the docking bay was dead. Ethan moved through the station with mechanical precision. His neural accelerators let him process defensive patterns faster than the guards could adjust. His augmented reflexes made him untouchable. His weapons never missed. He reached the central control room and found it sealed behind blast doors designed to withstand capital ship weapons. He placed shaped charges on the door's hinges and stood back. The explosion rocked the station. Ethan walked through the smoke and found the control room's crew staring at him in shock. "Shut down the planetary defense network," he ordered. The head technician, a Krythian female with graying scales, met his eyes with defiance. "We'll never surrender our homeworld to you. I'm giving you a chance to evacuate civilians before I start breaking things. You're one man. You can't threaten an entire planet." Ethan shot the control panel beside her. Sparks flew. "I just disabled your eastern shield grid. Want to see what else I can do?" The technician's four eyes widened as her displays confirmed the damage. One shot, one panel. Millions of people suddenly vulnerable to orbital bombardment. "You're insane. I'm efficient. Now shut down the network and evacuate your cities, or I'll do this the hard way." For a long moment, no one moved. Then alarms began blaring across the station. The tactical displays lit up with new contacts. Vek'thor's voice echoed through the speakers. "Attention, human terrorist. You're surrounded by our defense fleet. Surrender immediately." Ethan activated his comm. "Vek'thor. Good. I was hoping you'd come back. Makes this easier. You can't win. We have 200 ships converging on this station, and I have my hand on the button that controls every defense on your homeworld." Ethan moved to the central control console. "Let's negotiate." On his flagship, Vek'thor watched the standoff develop with growing dread. The human had somehow infiltrated the most secure facility in Krythian space. He'd killed the guards, breached the control room, and now held their entire planetary defense network hostage. "He's bluffing," Vek'thor's tactical officer said. "One man can't operate those systems." Ethan's voice came through cold and clear. "Want to test that theory? I can start by dropping the shields over your capital city. See how confident you feel when your government complex is exposed to vacuum." Vek'thor's claws dug into his command chair. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand something. You came to human space thinking you could intimidate us. You thought executing diplomats would make us afraid. You thought threatening our colonies would make us surrender." Ethan's voice dropped to something darker. "You were wrong. You didn't scare us. You just made us decide that mercy was too expensive. We've withdrawn from your territory. The conflict is over. The conflict is over when I say it's over. And right now I'm standing in your most critical facility with the power to drop every defense you have. So you're going to listen very carefully to my terms." Vek'thor waited, his pride and rage warring with the terrible reality of his situation. "You're going to broadcast a message to every species in the galaxy. You're going to explain that the Krythian Empire attacked humanity without provocation. You're going to apologize for the diplomats you murdered. And you're going to pay reparations to every human colony you've threatened. We'll never agree to those terms. Then I'll destroy your control station, drop your shields, and let nature take its course." "How long do you think your civilization survives without orbital defenses?" Vek'thor's tactical officer pulled up projections. "Without the control station, the orbital network would collapse. The shields would fail. The weapons platforms would go offline. Krythis Prime would be defenseless against meteor strikes, solar radiation, and hostile fleets." "You'd commit genocide over a political dispute?" Vek'thor asked. "You threatened to glass New Haven. 2 million civilians. Don't lecture me about genocide when you wrote the textbook." The connection went silent. Vek'thor looked at his officers and saw his own helplessness reflected in their faces. They were the Krythian Empire. They'd never been defeated, never surrendered, never been forced to negotiate from a position of weakness. Until now. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. It's Queen Isabella." Vek'thor's display split to show Isabella's face. She looked tired, worried, and furious. "Ethan, stand down. That's a direct order." "With respect, Your Majesty, I'm following the order you already gave me. I'm rescinding that order. The Krythians are retreating. New Haven is safe. This has gone far enough." "Has it?" "Because from where I'm standing, the Krythians are still a threat. They're still capable of attacking human worlds, and I'm in a position to end that threat permanently." Isabella's voice shook. "By committing genocide? By dropping the shields on their homeworld and killing billions? That's not defense, Ethan. That's murder. They would have done the same to us. We're not them. We're better than them. And if you do this, you'll prove that we're not." Ethan was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weariness that Isabella recognized. The same exhaustion she'd seen in him after Arcturus when he'd saved humanity and lost himself. "I've killed so many people, Isabella. Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands. I stopped counting during the war. And every single one of them deserved it less than the Krythians do. That doesn't make it right. No. But it makes it necessary. You woke me up because you needed a monster. You gave me an order because you knew I'd follow it no matter how dark it got. Well, this is how dark it gets. This is what no mercy looks like." Isabella closed her eyes. She thought of the vault she'd opened, the file she'd unsealed, the weapons she'd unleashed. And she realized that Ethan was right. She'd known exactly what she was doing when she woke him up. "I made a mistake." "Yeah, you did. And now we both have to live with it." Vek'thor watched the exchange with growing hope. If the human queen was trying to stop her own warrior, maybe there was still a chance to resolve this without humiliation. "Queen Isabella," he said carefully, "if you can convince your soldier to stand down, the Krythian Empire is willing to negotiate a peace treaty. We'll withdraw from human space and establish a demilitarized zone." Isabella looked at him with contempt. "You'll forgive me if I don't trust the word of someone who executes diplomats on live broadcast. We may have been excessive in our demands, but surely a peaceful resolution is preferable to this standoff." "Ethan?" Isabella's voice was quiet. "What do you think?" In the control station, Ethan looked at the Krythian technicians who were watching him with fear. He thought of the billions of people on the planet below, civilians who had no say in their empire's wars, children who'd never hurt anyone. And he thought of the 3 diplomats who'd been murdered for trying to prevent this exact situation. "I think," Ethan said slowly, "that the Krythian Empire needs to learn a lesson it'll never forget." His hand moved across the control console. On Krythis Prime, the shields over the capital city flickered and died. Vek'thor's eyes widened in horror. "Wait! We'll agree to your terms. All of them." Ethan raised the shields again. "Put it in writing. Broadcast it across the galaxy. And make sure every species knows that the Krythian Empire surrendered to one human." Vek'thor's pride shattered, but his survival instinct was stronger. "Agreed." Within the hour, the message went out. The Krythian Empire formally apologized for their aggression against humanity. They agreed to pay reparations. They established a demilitarized zone, and they did it all while the galaxy watched, their reputation as unstoppable conquerors destroyed by a single man. Ethan left the control station and made his way back to his ship. The Krythians didn't try to stop him. They were too busy processing their humiliation. Isabella was waiting when he emerged from hyperspace at Europa. She stood in the facility where he'd been frozen, watching as he docked his ship and stepped out onto the platform. They looked at each other across the chamber. 2 people who'd made impossible choices and would carry the weight of them forever. "I should never have woken you up," Isabella said quietly. "Probably not, but New Haven is safe. The Krythians won't threaten human space again. Isn't that what you wanted?" "At what cost? You held an entire planet hostage. You nearly committed genocide. Nearly. But I didn't. Because despite everything, I'm still human enough to pull back from that edge." Ethan's expression was hollow. "The question is whether you are." Isabella understood what he was asking. She'd unsealed the vault, given the order, unleashed the weapon. And now she had to decide what to do with him. "The council wants you court-martialed. They're calling you a war criminal. They're not wrong. Admiral Torres wants you locked away again. He says you're too dangerous to remain free. He's not wrong either." Isabella moved closer. "What do you want, Ethan?" He looked at her with those cold gray eyes that had seen too much death. "I want to go back to sleep. I want to forget the things I've done and the things I'm capable of doing. But mostly, I want you to promise me something." "What?" "Next time the galaxy threatens humanity, find another way. Because if you wake me up again, I won't stop." I won't pull back. I'll finish what I start, and you won't be able to live with what I become." Isabella felt tears sting her eyes. "I promise." Ethan nodded and walked back to the cryogenic chamber. He lay down without hesitation, his augmented body already slowing its functions in preparation for deep freeze. "Isabella?" His voice was fading. "You were right to wake me up. New Haven needed saving. But Torres was right too. Some weapons are too dangerous to use twice." The chamber sealed. The freezing process began. And Ethan Cross disappeared into darkness once more, carrying the weight of an empire's surrender and a queen's impossible choice. Isabella stood alone in the facility, watching frost form on the chamber's surface. She thought of the 2 million people on New Haven who would never know how close they'd come to annihilation. She thought of the Krythian Empire, humbled and broken by a single human. And she thought of the vault in her office that still contained files on weapons too terrible to unleash. Admiral Torres found her there an hour later. "The council is satisfied," he said quietly. "Ethan's actions resulted in a complete Krythian withdrawal. They're calling it the most successful military operation in human history. They don't know how close it came to being the worst. No, they don't. And maybe it's better that way." Torres looked at the sealed chamber. "What are you going to do with the file?" Isabella had already decided. "I'm going to put it back in the vault. I'm going to add 10 more levels of security. And I'm going to make sure that no one, not even me, can open it without the unanimous approval of every human colony. That might take years." "Good, because if we ever need Ethan Cross again, it means we've failed so catastrophically that we deserve whatever happens next." They left the facility together, sealing it behind them with protocols that would take decades to override. Above them, Europa's ice stretched cold and eternal, hiding humanity's greatest shame and greatest weapon beneath frozen silence. In the vault on Earth, Isabella locked away the file marked with a red handprint. She added encryption that would require technology that didn't exist yet to break. She created fail-safes that would destroy the file if anyone tried to access it without proper authorization. And she recorded a message for whoever might one day face the same impossible choice she'd made. "To whoever finds this file, I am Queen Isabella Monroe. I unsealed Project Reaper because I thought I had no choice. I gave the order No Mercy because I believed it was the only way to save my people. And I discovered that some victories cost more than defeat ever could. If you're reading this, you're probably facing a threat that seems insurmountable. You're probably thinking that the only solution is to unleash a weapon you can't control. I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. There's always another way, always another choice. Find it, because the moment you decide that mercy is too expensive, you stop being worth saving." She sealed the message and walked away from the vault, carrying the weight of command and the knowledge that she'd come within minutes of becoming the monster she'd unleashed to save her world. The galaxy remembered the day the Krythian Empire surrendered to one human. Songs were sung, stories were told. Legends grew around the man who'd infiltrated an entire fleet and held a planet hostage with nothing but skill and augmented determination. But no one knew the real story. No one knew about the queen who'd opened a forbidden vault. No one knew about the order that had nearly led to genocide. No one knew about the weapon that slept beneath Europa's ice, waiting for the day when humanity would be desperate enough to make the same mistake twice. And Isabella prayed that day would never come. 'Cause she'd learned the hardest lesson any leader could learn. Sometimes the greatest threat isn't the enemy at your gates. It's the weapon you create to defend against them.